Hello, and welcome to Straight from the Training Ground, the show where everything always goes as planned. This is Jay. I'm here with my partner in crime, Ryan. Ryan, how we doing this week?
Doing pretty good.
Good. Good to hear. This week, we have an interesting topic we thought we'd discuss and bring to everyone: data and technology in soccer. Obviously, in the time we've been coaching and playing, it's changed quite a lot. I would say, especially in the last 5 to 10 years. We have a great interview ahead from a Division One assistant coach who does some great things. You definitely want to stay tuned for that. Ryan, before we get to that, what have you been up to lately?
Well, I've been up to working on scheduling for the summer, which I'm in that process of contacting other coaches and seeing when they can be available to come to our place to play a game, and then we play the return leg at their place. All the real fun stuff. So that's what happens when you're somebody who runs a small time men's team. So busy with that stuff.
It's the same for everyone. I hate to tell you. High school coaches, club coaches, yeah, all that stuff behind the scenes that people don't really understand. So spring's kicking off, so glad to be back outside. Hopefully the weather's getting better. Getting some outdoor training sessions in. Great to be back outside with all of the teams and all those things. So as we dig into this data and technology, as I alluded to before there, Ryan, obviously things have changed quite a bit over the years. One we want to just dig into before we get to our interview. Pretty interesting things over the years. I even learned a little bit about this as you and I were talking beforehand here off camera. A couple of things about data and technology and how it's evolved in soccer dates all the way back to World War II with Charles Reap, who was an accountant for the Royal Air Force. He was credited with some of the first data in football in Britain after World War II. He went on to work with Brentford, Wolves, Sheff Wednesday, Wimbledon, Watford, Norwegian national team. And he basically, something you're very familiar with in your neck of the woods, came up with the 91% of scoring moves come from 3 passes or less philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the prevailing attitudes back in the day, I'm talking mid 80s, probably before that in the 70s, but mid 80s, even when I was playing as a young guy growing up, was, you move the ball around a little bit at the back, but then you go forward, right? You go forward quickly and you go forward. Also, when you go forward, it's to the striker and it's usually to the head to get the ball flicked onto somebody else behind him. The old standard of long ball. And that was kind of an accepted thing.
Yeah, and I thought that was very interesting because, like I said, I didn't realize it. I never would have dreamed probably that it dated back that far to the World War II era. You mentioned also earlier in the week as we were talking about these things, there is a little bit of a difference between data and technology, and we're going to kind of try to hit on both of those things, but some of these kind of touch base in different areas. A lot of people here are familiar with Moneyball and the Oakland A's and Major League Baseball and how prevalent that's become. It's a huge topic in Major League Baseball right now. With data analysis and those kind of things. But they went on to make a very popular movie called Moneyball. And Billy Beane, who's a star of that, who came up with that philosophy, I guess, through numbers and analytics from baseball, actually went on to be an advisor for the Dutch side AZ Alkmaar in 2015. Another little tidbit of information I did not know of. And right now, Liverpool, Alkmaar, and Brentford are kind of the teams leading the way with a lot of this data analysis. Not only the technology side of obviously how they analyze their players in training and all those kind of things and in games, but also how they build a team financially, how they look into players, the prices they pay, what they try to get in their returns. Very interesting stuff. Liverpool and Brentford have something they call, it's a philosophy called the quest for rationality, which kind of is what they use. They dig into numbers a lot. I think a lot of us are looking for that quest, Ross. But this is a little bit too much for you, I know. But just hang in there. This is what they use to really dig really deep into how much do they value a player for, how much do they think they can get in return, and obviously how much can they, get a bargain or a steal and for a potential of a player.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the things you're talking about, the business side of it, it's risk analysis, right? And I think that in the movie Moneyball, that's what they're talking about. How do you get return on investment for your players? Is it going to be an old style coach who's doing it on gut instinct and what he sees and his feel for it, which is something you can't really kind of estimate and understand, but that's something that is real. or are you going to do it based on data and analytics? And obviously, that's why that movie highlights really well. And I think that's what, it's soccer at a professional level is a huge business, huge amount of investment. So, I understand the data that's gone into that. In terms of analytics as well, and in terms of players, the biggest thing I think about now is how much video is in the game, how much video analysis happens. Even at the top level where there's 10 different cameras or 20 different cameras at the game. But even, at the youth level, the collegiate level, where there's so much more video analysis and video taping basically happening. Even at the little kids levels, I mean, parents are showing up and they're videoing games. But one element or one aspect that I've seen is at the collegiate level. When you and I played college soccer, okay, and I mentioned this, I think, last week, we'd play and we'd go into the locker room before the game, and our coach would maybe he'd have a chalkboard. He tells, we're going to do this formation, that formation, you're playing here, blah, blah, blah. And 95% of everything he talked about was about us. It was about our team, because we had no video evidence of who we were playing. It was just there was no video around then. It was definitely, and if there was, it was really hard to share. And then maybe for about 5% of the time, he'd mention, the number 10 or the number 8 on the other team. Watch this guy, he does this, he's pretty good at it. And we'd say, how do you know that? Well, I heard it from 2 coaches that wanted to play. It was all really little, tidbits of information. Everything was based on us. But now I think at the collegiate level, video, the technology of video is used so much.
You and I know, just through casual conversations over the last 5 years or so, have both noticed huge changes in what we do, at the club level and even with high school teams. It's very normal now to go to almost any level club game, I would say, and see, the long tripod mounted cameras that video your own game for you, and the different analysis that comes along with that. As a high school coach myself, our high school team, we have video of every single game. We have video of opponents and scouting. You can share those things between other coaches now online. They get reports, it's pretty easy. It's not anything crazy. It's just pretty easy to do that. Anyone can do nowadays. Very accessible. It's just amazing how much it's changed. But
I was just going to say that I think that it's the question, right? Is it an art, coaching soccer, or is it a science?
Yeah.
Or is it somewhere in between the two? And I think that's where, with interview guests, we'll get into that a little bit. And it's just fascinating.
The last area here real quick that I thought was nice to point out, the areas that a lot of these teams have been using, obviously you can use it in scouting, as we mentioned, player fitness. Since about the early 2000s, GPS tracking and all those kind of things have become they've increased. I don't even know how much, over the years in terms of how much teams use those, even in games and stuff nowadays, teams of all levels. Brentford uses, they're famous, they've been promoted and now in the Premier League for what they use as an expected goals formula. They've also, this is a pretty astounding fact, 1 year they paid out £12.5 million for players and their turnover, over the summer transfer window. And when they sold those players, they sold them in return for £109.2 million. So I think that's a pretty good formula, whatever it is they've come up with there, all while operating on a 60% less, overall budget than the league average. So pretty profound stuff. Obviously, there is something to it, but like you said, I think the golden question is, where does the art and science come together?
Well, maybe what we're seeing is everybody's on their smartphones these days. Everybody's on the mobile devices. Maybe the youth now that are playing soccer are more responsive.
What did you say? I was getting a text. Sorry, what?
Yeah, but maybe the youth today that are just more responsive to digital cues, to basically getting things illustrated on the device than they are by human communication.
A lot of great stuff this week. Make sure you stay tuned for that interview. Very good stuff. Hit us up down on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. Hit us up on our website. All of our episodes are available there as well. And like and subscribe us on YouTube. Do whatever it is that you do. Welcome to our special interview guest this week. We're very happy to have Inaki Gonzalo San Millan with us from the University of Virginia Women's Soccer Program. Inaki, thank you very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, you two, for having me. Very excited.
So, Iñaki, first of all, for all of our viewers, just tell us a little bit about, first of all, your background, what led you to the current job you have at the University of Virginia, and how you got here.
Yeah, so I am originally from the Basque Country in North Spain, and I come from a soccer family with my father playing professionally, cousins. I play also when I was a teenager, but I didn't continue. I was more focused on my education, as over there is always a little bit more complicated to do both things. And then I had the opportunity of coming to the USA for a year right after my BA. I liked what I saw. I also played some soccer. I started just getting familiarized. But it was only a few years later when I decided to come back and do my postgrad education. I almost finished my doctorate, but I haven't. But during the whole process of doing the master and the PhD, I become engaged with the soccer community where I was, and I became a coach, high school coach, club coach, and the last year I got the opportunity of joining the University of Virginia program in the women's side, as you mentioned. And because it's such a well-resourced program with such a quality coaching staff, I decided to join.
That's excellent. So your specific role with the University of Virginia's women's program, can you give us a little bit more about that? I know we've talking about in this the theme of today's kind of like technology that's coming into the game. So can you give me a bit of a background on what you do and some details?
Yes, of course. So the University of Virginia has four coaches on the roster, and NCAA only allow four coaches to actually coach on the field. But there are also two other members. One of them, myself, also full time, who work on other different functions and roles. And some of the main roles of our of these two members is just to collect data from the games and then put that into statistics that are important for the game model of University of Virginia, and then ultimately to transfer and communicate that information to the coaches so we can all work together to put together game plans, to put together sessions. And that's basically why they needed someone else. They needed more because they were collecting a lot of data and information, and they wanted to be a little bit more precise also in the way they were communicating that to the coaches and then the coaches to the players. Together with that, I was also the first person doing the scouting from the opponents or of the opponents, and then putting together scouting reports for the coaches. And ultimately, the other main function was to review the video of the training sessions, as well as the games, looking for specific moments and instances that I could cut and put together for players to help in their individual development.
And so just to dig into that a little bit deeper, so specifically you review a lot of game film from the opponents, and you will sit down maybe with one of your players or a group of defenders or attackers or something and go over things. Is that how it works?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, like for rules, I could not be interacting about soccer with players.
Well,
And so what I will do is just look to the games. As you mentioned, I watch a lot of games, not just from our games, from the opponents, but when it comes to our players, I will watch the games and start seeing patterns and elements that were sometimes reinforcement of our game model, sometimes issues in our game model when it comes to players. And then I will create a folder, let's say, and start just putting those clips into the folder. And then I will have a meeting with one of the coaches. Depending, we distribute a little bit the functions and the roles of the coaches. Some of them more focused with the back line, some of them more focused with creation, midfielder, and finishing. And I will meet with them, explain and show the clips, and then ultimately the coach will meet with the players to go over the videos.
And so that you do that from, let's say, an internal point of view on your own squad, and you also do that from maybe an opposition analysis side of things, right?
Yes, for the opposition, it was just watching all the games that I would consider relevant for us playing against them, and then put together a scouting report that I will present. Let's say we are playing on Saturday. I will present the scouting report on Monday in the meeting with the coaches. And then in that meeting, we start based on that, and also the input from other coaches, because they also watch just one specific game that I recommend. We'll put together the training sessions. Where do we have to put the emphasis? And we will start imagining the game plan as well.
Wow, that's fantastic. Fantastic. Jay?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I love it. What do you see? Obviously, we've talked a little bit off camera about the changes in the last, 10 to 20 years in soccer everywhere at all levels with technology and data. But what do you see, not even at the college level, but, youth coaches, club coaches, high school, in the future, the role that you think this will continue to play, data analysis? Obviously, film has been around for a long time, but you dive a lot deeper than that. What do you see the future of that becoming for a lot of people at all levels of soccer?
Well, there's one element with all this that has to do with the access to way more information. We have way more information of our own team. We have way more information of the opponents. We have more information about the specific players and the way they are developing. The information may come just from video, may come from writing reports, may come also from other sources. When you go into more professional, you have information that has to do with the psychological aspect of the player, has to do with the physical aspect. So we have so much information. That's why, and we were talking about this before, it's so important now, our ability to filter the things that are important, and then to being able to communicate the things that you consider important to the next person in line that has to be, or the people that have to be taking the decisions. So all this have to do, to me, with communication skills and with effective communication. And then within that, you have all these elements that are going to help you to have the point across, but also are going to help you and to have players that are way more equipped also to have the back and forth, to be more in charge of their own development, to have more of a say in the game model of your team. So all this makes coaching staffs and coaches in general way more receptive to other ideas. So I think it's fascinating on that side. Now, what happens now yet is that we still have so much information and we can access to all that information, but are we well equipped to utilize for the better? That's the challenge for all of us. That's the challenge ultimately. How can you have all that information when your team is playing like that? You are not able to do, the more basic goals for the game, and you have way more information than 10 years ago, right? So the point is how we are able to utilize, how we are able to get done concretely and effectively all the other phases that we have to do to get a better product.
Yeah, that's interesting. It sounds like you're saying there's a challenge sometimes is not being information overload, right? And
yes.
And then the challenge is how do you communicate that and in a productive fashion. So I think it sounds to me like this innovation's like it's here to stay, but it's how we're going to use it as if it's going to be successful. It's great hearing this because I remember Jay and I used to play at a time where you'd have your scout.
Luckily, there was no film. Luckily,
there was basically almost no film of the opponents. Number one, but number two, there would be, your coach would go over, well, this is what we're going to do today. Oh, no, by the way, the number 10 on the other team's pretty good. And that was it. So, that's back in a long time ago. Anyway, so this is fascinating to hear how it's evolving and actually being applied at the collegiate level,
Yeah. And the adjustments on the fly and the understanding of the moments, those things are not, are not outdated. You still as a player, you still as coaches have to do those things in the moment. And even during the training sessions, right? But you have way more resources to make your points and to get the opportunity to the players to actually understand. Because what you mentioning from the 90s is like, okay, and what should I do with that information that you just gave to me, right? If we are ahead on the process, all of us are going to benefit from that.
I have one last question to kind of add on to that real quick. Do you find that some players you work with, and I know not directly in training, but individual players or coaches, do some actually want less information than others? Some are more into it than others.
Absolutely. Yep. And And I will say usually the ones that want more information are becoming coaches in 2-3 years because they want to start those kind of conversations. But that said, sometimes you even have one of those that were quiet and were only playing becoming coaches. So it's fascinating. But definitely, as a student, you have to understand who needs more information, who needs only visuals, who needs just physical care and things like that. It's fascinating on that regard as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, and Inaki, we really, like I said, can't say enough. We really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today. We wish you all the best, and obviously we're going to be more supporters of Virginia women's soccer now and follow you along there. And we wish you the best. Real quick before we get you out of there, can we ask you real quick, what team do you support? Put you on the spot.
That's you put me on a spot. My dad played for Athletic and all that, and I was looking more to Atletico Madrid. So life is challenging. But before I say you goodbye, I want to say that you guys are doing a great job, a fantastic job, hitting on topics that are not so mainstream but are very important for the majority of us coaches. I do believe that the best coaches are not the ones that we see on TV, are the ones that are doing their job, and we barely see them doing their job.
Brilliant. That's great.
Well, thank you, man. Yep. Yeah, we really appreciate it, like I said, and we'll definitely follow you on from here on out. We appreciate you taking the time. Keep up the great work, and it's great talking to you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Inaki.
Visit our friends at Football Town for casual football wear. Visit our partners at TractionSocks.com for performance grip socks created for all athletes. Use the discount code TractionSocks22 right now for savings. And until next time, straight from the training ground.